Hey everyone, it is time to reflect on another year in film, which quite possibly is another beloved year of cinema for me. 2022 had a lot to offer in my personal taste in genre fiction, and sure, like any other year, there were movies people absolutely loved or thought were complete and utter disappointments. But a majority of the movies I was excited to see this past year delivered like I thought they would, but also in ways I didn't remotely expect. But enough with the chit chat, I can't wait to share with you the films I loved this past year. But before I get into it, a couple disclaimers. My top 10 list is my top 10 list. So of course, yours will be different, and I'll have some movies ranked higher in different places you wouldn't expect, and that's okay. Also, I was only able to make time for certain movies and couldn't see every single release this year. It is what it is, and before we get into the Big 10, here are tons of lovely honorable mentions. Disenchanted, another comforting twist on Disney fairy tales. Unbearable weight of massive talent. Nicolas Cage delivers impeccable cinema, maybe his best. Scream 5, a bloody fantastic return to form for one of my favorite horror franchises. Mad God, an achievement in stop-motion animation storytelling by legendary animator Phil Tippett of Star Wars and Jurassic Park fame. Top Gun Maverick, quite possibly one of the best action movies ever made, no question. The Northman, another outstanding endeavor by Robert Eggers that left me floored. Everything Everywhere All at Once, one of the craziest and most emotional cinematic experiences I've ever seen. Turning Red is the perfect coming-of-age story fantastically crafted by Pixar. Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, a brilliant continuation in the wizarding world that made me rethink and appreciate the franchise on a deeper level. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is one of the single greatest video game movies ever made. Nope. Jordan Peele does it again, twisting the horror genre on its head. Prey. Dan Trachtenberg developed a stellar entry in the Predator franchise that may be the best since the original movie. Barbarian. A horror film that kept me guessing throughout and got me increasingly more pumped to see it play out, and boy did the payoff deliver. Halloween Ends. Didn't work for some, but I was left completely satisfied and compelled by the themes that I also found held the franchise together. Personally, I loved this movie. Smile, one of the best and most original horror films I've ever seen in recent years, and honestly left me wanting more as soon as it ended. The Black Phone had one of the best character arcs I've seen in a horror movie, as we saw in our protagonist Finney. Ethan Hawke was also superb as the grabber. And lastly, Thor: Love and Thunder did it for me. I had a blast with this film, and it was some of the most fun I've had in theaters all year. Sorry, not sorry. And now here are my top 10 movies of 2022. Number 10, Strange World. Another visually stunning Disney animation film that I thought captured the essence of a dysfunctional family flawlessly. And I love that the movie never made any of the characters feel unlikable, and you cared about each of their motives and understood where their feelings stemmed from. What I've been loving from Disney animated movies lately is that instead of having clear-cut good guys and bad guys, that it's challenging viewers to see the flaws in the main protagonists themselves. I loved seeing the Clade family play off of each other, and the mysterious world they found I thought had lots of fun to be had, and I thought was fun for Disney to dabble with, which is why I'm sad this will end up being another bomb for them like Atlantis or Treasure Planet, but I feel it'll eventually garner a following in years to come. Number 9, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. Definitely not one I expected to be in my top 10 at all. I was interested in seeing this movie and remembered the original YouTube videos back in the day, but I was greatly impressed by this film's sheer creativity, and although quirky, it still managed to have an honestly beautiful emotional center. I teared up twice during this movie, and just loved how pure it is to see Marcel live his life, and form a bond with the filmmaker Dean Fletcher Camp. This was a very wholesome film that I cannot wait to see again. Number 8, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. This felt like the perfect love letter to movies and animation, and I dug the crap out of this movie. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is quite possibly my favorite movie of all time that's not Star Wars, and I felt this movie was the perfect successor, and it felt like that type of movie for this generation. I loved seeing the different animation styles paired with live action, and the jokes and references this movie made had me in tears of joy. I loved Chip and Dale's friendship play out and see it rekindled throughout the movie. It blew me away, and it is no doubt one of those movies this year that filled me with so much glee. Number 7, Glass Onion. Like its predecessor, this film also had a pitch-perfect ensemble, but I loved how it was different, where instead of it being a dysfunctional family, that it was a group of friends who were broken individuals. The movie explored that element in a very masterfully crafted mystery film. Rian Johnson just keeps delivering for me and has really done such a lovely job with making genre films by challenging narrative tropes to make you delve deeper into the themes. I think as of right now, I would say it's right on par with Knives Out, and not to mention Daniel Craig is still utterly superb as Benoit Blanc. The dialogue was very snappy and hilarious, and I just loved the overall suspense and build-up throughout the movie, which I thought culminated in quite possibly one of the greatest endings I may have ever seen. Glass Onion is another home run by Ryan. Number 6, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. I can confidently say that this may be one of the best directed films in the entire MCU franchise. Ryan Coogler is just a true artist. The cinematography in this movie blew me away. The character motivations really got under my skin, whether it was involving Shuri or Namor. I just love that this was another franchise film that, again, like other films on this list, challenged the way you think about these characters. I love that the movie didn't quite make you see it as a good versus evil type deal, and instead give an understanding about the way these characters felt. The performances all around were magnificent and quite possibly the best I've ever seen from this cast. Also, the tribute for Chadwick Boseman cannot be expressed in words. The legacy this film left behind floored me, and the mid-credit scene was honestly top 3 for me. I get choked up when I think about it. Number 5, Avatar: The Way of Water. I was excited to see another sequel in this world, and after getting hyped by revisiting the original and finally visiting Pandora and Animal Kingdom this past year, I was dying to see this movie. And I can honestly say that after 13 years since the original, this sequel did not disappoint. I absolutely adored The Way of Water, and it met all my needs. The imagination that James Cameron has for this world always leaves me in awe, and to think that the technology could be topped even in the slightest. You would think with 13 years of planning, maybe more, but I truly think that this film has the greatest visual effects work I've ever seen, and maybe the best 3D presentation I've seen as well. I also was genuinely impressed by the depth these characters had in the movie. Sure, the plot was simple, but I was really invested in Jake and Neytiri and this beautiful bond they had with their family, and the ways they wanted to protect them. In a way, this movie was about family and the sacrifices one makes to care about the ones they love. I thought the film was very beautifully told, and I cannot wait to see it again in theaters in 3D. Number 4, The Batman. This was my most anticipated movie of 2022, and I can honestly say that it delivered in every single capacity. Matt Reeves captures the perfect iteration of Gotham that had this amazing film noir aesthetic that took me back to comics like Batman Year One and The Long Halloween. Robert Pattinson's portrayal as Bruce Wayne Batman this time around might be my favorite since the late Kevin Conroy's in the animated series. I loved seeing this movie play out more like a detective noir film. So refreshing to see in this day and age. Colin Farrell was just unrecognizable as this gangster iteration of the Penguin. He was great. Paul Dano's chilling iteration of the Riddler I think was one of the best comic book movie villains I've ever seen since Heath Ledger's Joker. Also, it goes without saying that Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman was flawless, and I loved seeing the more grounded approach for this character this time around. I cared so much about her, and it was honestly the best and most human writing for a female character I've ever seen, and it was spectacular. I'm so excited to see what's in store for this particular iteration of Batman, but on its own, it does everything right to make you fall in love with Batman as a character, and just reignites why he's one of the greatest superheroes ever created. Number 3, Lightyear. I am so sad this movie underperformed, because to me, when I first saw this film, it became an instant classic. Visually, it's one of Pixar's best, and I love that they made characters like Buzz and the Zap crew feel so relatable, and you could identify with the personal issues they were dealing with. I thought it was important in that way, but also the sci-fi backdrop to go along with it was just fantastic. I want more Lightyear movies that'll explore more of this galaxy. I want to see what the rivalry between Buzz and Zurg will build into. This movie was just that good for me that I wanted to see a sequel immediately after this movie ended. I just loved seeing a brand new sci-fi world introduced, and the fact that it had depth to it reminded me why I'm so gravitated towards these kinds of movies. I love Disney and Pixar making these types of movies, and I seriously hope that, like Strange World, that the movie finds life whether on Disney+, digital, or physical media. I hope it gains more of an audience down the line, and earns more of a following so we can hopefully see more from the Lightyear universe. So elated this film was made, and it totally meant so much to me being a fan of Buzz in the Toy Story franchise, but also making me fall in love with him in a new fashion. Number 2, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I've heard about Del Toro getting this movie made for so long, and to finally see it released was such a treat. And this movie turned out to be another animation masterpiece. The stop-motion animation is stellar, and not to mention the designs for every single puppet created. The film was beautifully made, but also the themes were beautiful. This was another perfect coming-of-age story where we saw Pinocchio come into his own and learn moral values and how important acts of kindness and selflessness are. I mean, they just don't make movies like this as much. I was so impressed by this movie, and so glad I now have this movie to enjoy in my life. It was a much more mature take on the story I've always loved, and one I'm glad I was able to take seriously, but also be enchanted by. It is my favorite animated movie of 2022. And my number one favorite movie of 2022 was one I was incredibly pumped out of my mind to see. It might not have necessarily been the best for some people, and had a lot of expectations riding on it, but I saw this movie 3 times opening weekend, and I continue to love it more and more the more I think about it. Number 1, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This was a movie that reminded me of why I'm so passionate about films, about comics, superheroes, fantasy, and horror. This was honestly the most fun I've had in theaters ever. Spoiler alert right off the get-go, just in case, but I'm sure most of you watching have seen the film already. There were moments in this film that had my jaw on the floor. Seeing Scarlet Witch tear up Carmitage, Strange in America traveling through the multiverse, and of course, the obvious elephant in the room was the 2 of them traveling to Earth 838 and meeting with the Illuminati. Right down to Patrick Stewart as Professor X in his iconic yellow hover chair, Captain Carter, Black Bolt, Maria Rambeau as Captain Marvel, but of course, seeing John Krasinski as Reed Richards' Mr. Fantastic was one of the most perfect moments I've ever experienced in the theater. Also, Sam Raimi directing this entire movie was one of the best things to ever come out of the MCU for me. The way the action sequences were choreographed and the excellent use of suspense was just so refreshing to see. I also love that he didn't hold back and gave us imagery that was just so insane. I mean, this movie terrified me at times, and I love it when Raimi does that, but also sprinkles incredible humor throughout, whether it was Stranger Wong's exchanges, Strange with America, and of course, one of the greatest cameos of all time in Bruce Campbell as Pizza Papa. I loved seeing Wanda's arc play out more in this movie, and Elizabeth Olsen continues to prove to be one of the greatest casting choices of all time. Benedict Wong is perfect as Wong, and at this point, Benedict Cumberbatch is Doctor Strange. I could watch this film multiple times and never get sick of it. It reminded me of Raimi's genius whenever I watched his trilogies for Evil Dead and Spider-Man. I would say this is the perfect love child of both those stories. People had their complaints or whatever, but all I can say is that this was my kind of movie, and it still makes me giddy even with all the amazing new MCU movies and shows on the horizon. Multiverse of Madness is cinema. So those are my top 10 movies of 2022. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and be sure to check me out in the next video. Take care, everyone.